So Google is fantastic. Google Trends, Google Analytics, brilliant, generating stuff for us to look at and make sense of the world. But unless you've got pattern recognition in place, it goes up and then it goes down. Is that good? Is it bad? What does it mean? This kind of pattern stuff, and this is not the only pattern, but this kind of pattern recognition really helps us make sense of this huge data hosepipe coming at us. So, for example, at the top, this is that asymmetric spike, which we've seen before, some external event. It's actually the World Health Authority announcing the flu pandemic, swine flu pandemic, led to Google searches going through the roof, and then collapsing away on that term. What you see beneath is the build of searches, very different pattern, and much further away in time, but much smoother and more symmetrical around the term that then became adopted, H1N1. So it tells us different things are going on. If this was, for example, something that was challenging your business, you would know what kind of thing was happening. On the top here, there's an external event. Otherwise, you've got the community talking to each other and learning from each other. Different strategies are going to be appropriate for dealing with those two things. So, but that's just individual things spreading through populations. What I got really excited about was seeing what these social scientists were doing with population level patterns, rather than those individual items spreading through a population. What patterns were there in populations that could help us diagnose this independent versus social state, as you look at it? And and we started to put this to work, and so I'll just show you some examples now. So, for example, if, as many manufacturers of consumer products believe, if consumers are actually considering each of the items in the market, given their functionality and their value and their design, independently of their peers, then you'd expect to see a different pattern from people buying what other people are buying. The product may be better. The example on the right, Dr. Dre's Beats headphones are okay. They're not the best in the market, but they gain their success, huge market share growth in recent years because of their topicality and their fashionability. In other words, other people think they're good. Other people buy them. And there's a really, really simple pattern comparison here, which I was gobsmacked to see when we looked at the sales, is so powerful. Really, really simple. Left-hand side, independent choice, when you've got a short tail plot of popularity versus a long tail plot. Let me just explain what that means, what these graphs are. X-axis on both of these graphs is rank, sales rank. So, for example, number 1 to N. Most popular to the least popular. And then the y-axis is sales. Now, Chris Anderson wrote a great book called The Long Tail a couple of years ago, which showed how common this is, particularly in what he calls culture markets, the thing on the right. What he didn't bother to think about really was the fact that this is indicative of social influence beneath. When you look at a market plotted out like that. On the left-hand side, there are a number of versions of this. So sometimes it's a straight line, which is more like Andrew Ehrenberg's old Dirichlet. But this is very common. The difference being largely that very few items on the short tail distribution account for a very small amount of the market. So you have very few things which have almost nothing, no share of the pie. Whereas the long tail distribution, it's an awful lot of items account for very, very, very little. Hence long tail. Now those patterns are really, really simple, and for someone who's basically innumerate like me, very, 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 very useful. We can look at large data sets and make sense of them. We can look at whole markets, as we'll see, markets by country, or markets by country against each other, and do it over time. Very quickly make lots of very useful comparisons. So here's this very simple plot. I've got five markets there, which we happen to have looked at in different countries. And I wonder where you think we might plot each of those. Let's start with popular music downloads. Where do you think those will fit? Left or right? Right, exactly. Now what about charitable donations? What do you think about that? I've looked at 40 years of giving USA data. It's very, very clear. Right or left? Right. Left? Left, right? Just think through what it means for it to be on the right. If it's on the right, it means that, one, you've got a long tail distribution, and two, the behaviour itself is based on people copying each other. Truth is, it's on the right. What about spirits? Again, looked at about 50 years of US spirits consumption, both in category terms and in branding terms. Right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. What's really interesting about it is that all of the manufacturers insist on telling us about the provenance of the product, get us to sample it as if the unique qualities of the product would convince us, whereas in fact the social side of things is the really powerful thing that they're not. Interesting, already starts to expose some questions for strategy. Now, deodorants is a really interesting other case. Deodorants actually plot both sides. Deodorant format plots on the left-hand side as independent. And this is true across the world. I've done this in Asia, Europe, Central Europe, and North America. And the reason why it plots on the left-hand side is because people get stuck with the format. You're more likely to change the brand of roll-on that you use than change the format. This is a big pain for Colgate and for Procter's and for Unilever because aerosols are far more profitable, both per unit, and they use up much more quickly, so they're even doubly more profitable. So they keep trying, and every few years, in all those organisations, there'll be a big project trying to get people to trade up from roll-on to aerosol. And finally, car insurance. Have you ever tried to examine all of the options that are available to you against all of the dimensions? Just think about the degree of difficulty in that decision. So most of us go, hey, it's a name I recognise, or it was the one I did before. And it also explains why those comparison websites we see in financial services a lot, that is designed to help make it less guesswork than it might otherwise be. So it's a really simple way to plot, just using those things. And we've all got this sales data, take all the items in the market, all the SKUs, and just plot them out, see what the distributions look like. And I suspect in a few years this is something that everyone will do. Now here's this is what we get to at the end of the book, and this is the model that I find absolutely essential for setting strategy now in marketing and concepts. And we just add a simple extra dimension to the left, right, to the independent copy, which is how quickly things turn over. How quickly the popularity turns over. If it's slow, it's at the top, and if it's fast, it's at the bottom. And that creates 4 buckets, 4 styles of choice. Consider choice. A guy going through a record shop because he really wants that one record, one version of that piece of vinyl. If, like me, you're a music geek, there's only one brand of amp. It's the one that Jimi Hendrix used, and so on. It's Marshalls. Apple are fantastic at signaling. I see a number of us today have the Apple ProBook out, and the great thing about Apple, I don't know if you can see at the front here, and over here, the best bit, the most beautiful design piece of an Apple laptop is the illuminated, backlit Apple logo, which you as a user never get to see. It's not for your benefit, it's for other people, just as the white earpieces are. That's a fashion business, essentially, and then guesswork is if you try to choose a cell phone that isn't an iPhone, just look at the range of the thing. How do you tell them apart? Or again, think about car insurance, automotive insurance.